Well, everybody, welcome back to I believe it's now 8th episode of the HPLS podcast, where we always have somebody on that's going to give us a different mindset, a different strategy, different tools, and different structure frameworks to help you sell better, be better, and accomplish more. So today is no different. Now, when we start to get into our conversation today, I really want everyone to focus on that mindset, that shift in thought processes, and how we can apply one area of our life to another. And when you meet today's guest, you are going to just love it. Lynn has been through quite a bit when it comes to her individual and her own, life, and an accident that you're going to hear about, a pretty tragic accident that, when most of us think about it, anyone that exercises, it could happen to you, really shifted the way she looks at life and the trajectory of her life. So without further ado, Lynn, welcome to the HPLS podcast, and where we go into high performance and how we can create that dynamic life in sales, energy, and everything else that goes with it. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Dan. So first of all, my story?
Yeah, you know what? I mean, yeah, let's dive right in. Let's have some fun. Go for it.
Welcome to the HPLS podcast. Live, relevant, and high performance information, conversations, and education weekly.
Yeah, so I've been a corporate professional my entire career, and very highly functioning. I was with one of the big five back in the day, leading engagements all over the world, real estate, and then. Seems every downturn in the economy, I would be the special assets person, negotiating for people to restructure their debt or try to get as much money out of them as we could to get their money back on the bad loans, the bad debt. And then 5 years ago, something really seemingly traumatic happened, maybe a blessing in disguise in retrospect. But I was at the gym after a long run. I just finished a 7 or 8 mile run and decided I was feeling so good. I just wanted to maybe go do some weights. So you're familiar with the lat pull down machine, probably all you, where you sit and there's a bar overhead and you load the weight. And I had 70 or 80 pounds loaded. And then one of the pulls down, I don't remember how many, but there was some faulty equipment and the pulley snapped, the weights went down that way and the bar came down on my head with a force of 80 pounds. That created, I felt the brain shake inside my head, saw a flash of light. Don't know much what happened there, but I was mush. I had a traumatic brain injury. I had a neck injury. It rotated and twisted my axis. The impact, because of the seated position, caused like a hyper shifting in the low lumbar spine, which created the formation of a cyst on my spinal cord. And it's taken all of 5 years to really recover. I had 4 out of 5 impact tests when they first tested me after the brain injury, showed 0% cognition. One of them showed 5%. By the time I was able to try to go back to work full time 6 months later, it was a disaster, and I forgot how to do my job. In my world in special assets, a TDR, a trouble debt restructure, and accrual or a non-accrual status, these are like 101 terms. I had to go back and relearn them. I mean, it was really, and so I had to do just enough where people thought I was okay to be back at work, and then not so much as to continue to look at a computer screen and reconcuss myself, because if I did too much, I could feel it. But in the early stages of healing, I was just alone, prone, no light, no sound, no music, no phone, no nothing. I mean, it was just, I couldn't have any stimulation at all. And I didn't know anyone in my area. So it was really just me and my thoughts. And I remember people would call to check on me, and they would say, this is horrible. You should be so angry. I can't believe you're not going to run again. And what are you going to do? And just all this anger. And when I heard that, I literally could feel my brain swell inside my head. And I would get eye pain and nausea and dizziness. as if I was being re-traumatized. And of course, too, my medical bills were like $25,000 in the first month. And if I let myself think of that, I would feel the same, I'd become symptomatic again. So I learned very early on, you know, when I think negative thoughts or allow stress to come into my field, I literally feel my body responding in not a good way. I feel bad. But when I think nothing at all or positive thoughts or calming thoughts, I feel really good. And then I realized, well, I can replace the negative with the positive. And I became very acutely aware of what thoughts were going through my head at any given moment. And then realized I don't have to wait for a negative stressor to enter my field. I can just select what I want to think about, how I want to think any given moment of any day, can be very deliberate about how I want to think. And that just led me down this journey of really using my mind to heal. But it did way more than that. I mean, it just completely changed my trajectory in life, and ultimately helped me find my, like, a real purpose and live and be on and with purpose every single day. It's been a blessing in disguise.
You know, it's as you're speaking, I'm taking notes and I'm kind of writing things down because, you know, one of the things that we talked about was, you know, obviously unbelievable story, you know, where some people would have just slipped into that negative state for the rest of their life, possibly tried to sue the pants off the gym, you know, get this landfall. You know, very interesting, I found when we were first speaking, and even right now when you said, you know, a lot of your friends are like, you must be so angry. And I mean, yes, I mean, there's going to be frustration, but to have that mindset that you had to just, you know, okay, let's look at the situation, realize it's reality, but what do I do to learn from it? You know, I often say to salespeople, you know, every phone call, every time you have an interaction, you might get a no, but if you learn something from it, it's not mission failure, it's mission success, because you're educating yourself in the process. And, you know, you learning from those quiet times, those quiet moments, because let's think about it. Your quiet moments created this forward, upward trajectory for you. You know, you went vertical, where most people's quiet moments, they go down.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's that, I often say it's not what we say now. It's what I say up here when I'm lying in bed just before I go to sleep. It's what I say up here when I'm in the shower and things are quiet. And, you know, you get that kind of moment where it's just like, oh crap, can I really do that? And it's like, whoa, what am I talking about? So share with us that mentality set. How would you suggest to salespeople, to people that are on the front lines? Because here's the thing, your position that you had prior to this, I mean, you got to be a real good salesman. If somebody's got $20 and they owe you 30, how do you get 10 of that, at least 10 of that $20 before you can't collect anything? You know, I mean, collection agencies, and, you know, unfortunately, most of them are untalented, because I speak to a lot of them where they say, you know, I want you to help me sell. They've actually started to gain a lot of clients in the collection agency world, because they're like, I need to be a better salesman than anyone to try and collect money from someone that's already suffering.
Yeah.
Right. Tough, very tough position. Share with us, you know, talking to salespeople of today, of 2020, you know, how would some of these thoughts, these patterns, these new framework, the new strategies, the new techniques that you've processed over your quiet time help them today?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Yeah. So I had to deal with not only getting money from people who didn't have a lot of money, they had just lost their whole empire, you know? And so it was getting the money, it was negotiating maybe a workout agreement. So yeah, I had to be on top of it every day. And I'll just share with you quickly. I remember there was a point in time where I was sitting, my boss wanted to do a one-on-one with me out of the blue. And he called me in his office and he said, I need to know something. Are you looking for work? I said, no. He said, you just seem so happy. You're so productive. You're so steady. You just, like, the last 6 months have been crazy. I've seen this change. What's going on? I said, well, I am happy. And he said, well, even with all the upheaval and everything we were pre-merger, there was a lot of chaos. And I said, no, I mean, my happiness is not conditioned upon the strategic decisions of the CEO. And I realized in that moment, oh my God, I am a lot more productive because of what I've been doing. And things that used to bother me in this workspace don't bother me at all. And when you were saying a no, is I look at no's as not yet. You know, and it's how you frame everything, really. But so my whole thing is about looking at your mental hygiene, looking at what kind of thoughts are going through your head. And science suggests we have 70,000 thoughts in a day, and most of them are negative and in the subconscious. And we become wired that way by the time we're, you know, in our early 30s. And this is why a lot of people go straight to victim mode. They're just in that negative framework of thinking. Me being alone with my thoughts allowed me to, and no one really around me. That was a blessing in disguise, because then I could have full awareness about what was happening in my own mind. So a lot of people who are even in sales already have a negative mindset about the sales process itself. It's a tough thing for a lot of people to have a healthy mindset about. It sounds bizarre, but it really is. And so sales or problem solving or resisting change, you know, through mergers, it's all kind of the same principles. If there's something blocking you, otherwise you would have gotten to that goal. And so you got to really think of what it is you're thinking and when that enters the conversation. So for example, you might be going along in the process and everything's great. And then there's a point at which something happens and the nerves get to you. And a voice comes into your head and says, it's not working. I can't do this. I've seen this before. It didn't work out. It's not going to work. And that, you don't even see that coming. You don't even feel that in your mind. It's all in the subconscious. And that's why becoming aware is such a huge part of this. And I have tricks and tools, you know, to offer to help people really be cognizant of what kind of thinking is happening during that whole process, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense, I think, because, you know, what is it, 85-90% of the day we're on autopilot. You know, being cognitive of what thoughts are going through your head, specifically, okay, you know, for all of you out there in sales, obviously, let's talk about a sales call. You know, that thought process before picking up the phone, that thought process when the phone's ringing, that thought process of when you get the individual on the call. Right? For me, it's preparation. For me, it's, okay, I understand exactly what I want out of this call. Number one, most important thing. What is this interaction all about? You know, when you and I had our conversation, it was, okay, what's the intent of this interaction? Because if we're going to give up half hour, 45 minutes of our time, let's make it worth it for everyone that you know and everyone that I know, to make it worth it, to add some value, some content, you know, and that word value gets thrown out so much these days. But you know, for me, it's, what is the goal of the interaction? How am I going to add real value to the person on the other end of the line? That for me needs me to start questioning and figuring out why. You know, precursor to all of that is, why am I doing this in the first place? Right? So those are the three major thoughts that go through my head prior to picking up a phone call. A lot of salespeople just pick up, I got to dial for dollars. I got to call. I got to make calls, you know, whereas in essence, what's happening, and if I'm correct here, I'm taking what you're saying, you know, you had this accident. It made you way more cognitive about the thoughts, which create feelings, which create actions that you're having in life. You know, so if I could take kind of that first golden nugget for salespeople out there from what you're saying, Lynn, is be conscious of that thought. Understand what you want, why you want it, how you want it, and what this, you know, quote unquote call is going to do for you or can do for you, as opposed to just being mindless picking up the phone.
Yeah. And also, you know, be able to feel the outcome, be able to feel the emotion of the outcome as well. And I'll give you an example. It wasn't a sales call, but one of my clients asked me recently, and our first meeting together, hey, she's a tennis player, a very good tennis player, but she hadn't won a tiebreaker in close to 5 months. And she said, will you help me with my tennis game, because I haven't won a tiebreaker in months. And I said, well, I'm not a sports psychologist, but you know what? These principles should apply. what are you thinking when you're in the first set, the second set? What are you thinking when you're in the winning mode? And how does that feel in your body? And she could very easily describe it to me. And I said, what were you thinking once you got to the tiebreaker? And she kind of went into that victim mode, and she got nervous and she got scared. What if I don't win? What if it doesn't? And so she just went immediately to the other side of the coin.
I haven't won in 5 months. Like, what am I doing wrong?
What I'm doing wrong, it's all about, I'm losing again. It's all my fault. I'm no good. And so I had her envision what it would feel like to win the game and to put herself emotionally back in the place when she was winning. And within 3 days, she won a tiebreaker, and within a week, she won 4 more. So, I read in my book a lot. It's about, first of all, finding those negative thoughts. And we can do that in a variety of ways, and identifying what those are in you. And we start getting conditioned this way when we're very young, by the age of 7. And the Jesuits had a saying, show me the boy by the age of 7, I'll show you the man. Because they understood that all that conditioning by the age of 7 really pretty much you're going to hold the rest of your life, unless you can identify with it. So anyway, yes, be cognizant. Awareness is always number one, so that you can understand what is getting in my way of, like people with problem solving issues, same with sales. A problem arises and a lot of people tend to just push them away, give them to someone else, or table it for now, because guess what? They're thinking, I can't do that. That's too big. It's too much of a nuisance right now. Otherwise they would have tackled it. Usually when you have a goal, and I'm a coach, and I always start with the mindset, because I don't care what goal it is. If you have a goal and you haven't achieved it thus far, it's because there's something up here telling you you can't. And a lot of it's not our fault. We are wired this way. So we just have to rewire our thinking, you mentioned emotions and feelings. Every time we have a thought, I don't care what kind of thought it is, there is a biological, chemical, hormonal reaction in the body. So you have a positive thought, thinking of the ocean or a puppy or something, and your brain is going to release things like oxytocin and vasopressin and dopamine, and that is going to create a good feeling in the body, and then you'll have a corresponding emotion. That triggers a signal back to the brain that everything's good, and that's end of story. But when you're in negative thought, very different chemicals are released. Like we all know cortisol, the stress hormone. And then that produces a very different feeling and corresponding emotion, which signals back to the brain that something's off, and the brain senses anxiety and releases more chemicals. And so there's a more redundant feedback loop in that negative thinking. So it can be, it can be challenging, but it's not impossible. We can definitely rewire it to a more positive and productive outcome. And if I could just share one other example with you. After this bank I was with merged, I remember becoming very taken by just high anxiety about this deadline that I had. And whenever you've got anxiety in the body, that's a real good indicator that there's something up here that's got a lot of momentum.
So Lynn, can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
Deadline for what? Was it a deadline for the merger, or you had a deadline for a project?
A deadline just for some reporting on my portfolio.
Okay, so we can relate that in a sales perspective. We can relate that to like quota.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So now that we framed it,
go. So I said, well, what on earth is it I'm afraid of? I know it has something to do with the deadline, but what is it? I'm not going to meet it. That's what I was afraid of. So you're not going to meet your sales quota. You're terrified. It's causing a lot of anxiety in the body. All right, take a look at that. So what if I miss the deadline? Well, they may not like me. So what if they don't like you? Well, they might fire me. It's a new bank. So what if they fire you? Well, I won't have a job. And so what if you don't have a job? Well, I won't have a paycheck. So what? Then I won't be able to pay my bills. So what? Then I won't have you just keep peeling it back until you get to the end of, maybe I'll be alone and homeless. And then you realize, reality test, how ridiculous is that? Have I ever missed a deadline? Have I ever missed a quota? I don't think so. Maybe Is it grounds for firing? I don't think so. And have you ever been out of a job? Yeah, I think. Have you ever been unable to pay your bills? No, I've always figured it out. Okay, this is clearly a bunch of negative thinking, and none of it's true. And that's the point. Most all of these thoughts have no basis in reality. They're just thoughts.
And they spiral to this
Yes.
end that is so absolutely ridiculous in most cases. Like, listen,
yeah,
people have missed quota, you miss quota, you miss quota, you miss quota. There's a couple of things. And I think at that point, you miss kind of one quota. Okay, you missed two. Now it's time to have a conversation. Hey, Mr. Boss, Mr. Supervisor, here's the challenges I'm having. And you know what? Be open. We all don't know everything. We all can't profess to be the end all of everything. There's going to be challenges. I've been in sales 25 years, over 25 years in the transportation and logistics industry. I read every day, every sales book that's out. I read, I take little tidbits and I apply it to my business. And I say, okay, that didn't work. Okay, throw it out. But I tried it. Okay, that didn't work. Throw it out. I tried it. So the amount of calls that I've made in my career that have turned out to give me zero have taught me how to identify tire kickers, have taught me that these strategies work and these ones not so much. It's taught me that, this happens when this happens. And, I started collecting data. I started saying, okay, how can I take my career and utilize some of the data to help salespeople? And when I was training a group of salespeople at a major brokerage corporation, I collected that data from them as well. And I saw a unique trend when things started to do this from a call count and strategically making sales calls. All of a sudden, their clients started to do this. And when they had a dip, whether it be Christmas time, come that December 1st all the way through, 90 days later, you saw a dip in business. And it was things happened like clockwork. I once read, I think it was David Long's book, Built to Lead, where he says, the majority of good leaders can actually sit back at the beginning of the year and say, here's my numbers that I'm going to hit this year. Because they know the salespeople's routine based on that inner image of themselves, right? So having that negative thought process, I can never break $100,000 in profit a year. I can never break $200,000 in profit a year. I can never break 300 is such a fictitious thought. But here's the kicker, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is it's so real to the people that are thinking it. It is reality. That's what I say. Perspective is the individual's reality. It really is. And part of, your job as a coach, part of my job as a sales trainer and coach is to help them break through that reality. So when you're looking at that spiral, when you were looking at all of that, so what? I think that's a beautiful thing for everyone to do. So what if that happens? What's going to happen? So what? Because then you get it down to the ridiculous, and then you start working it back and you're like, yeah, and, exaggerating on that a bit. But share with us, in the end, when you started peeling that back, what did it really show you?
Well, it showed me that I create a lot of this on my own, and I have control over it.
It's the exact answer I was looking for.
We just create it on our own, and it's, it's just how we were wired. But once you learn how to shift it and move it around, it's really powerful stuff. And, and the other thing you were mentioning, I'll never do 100,000, I'll never do 200,000. There's a limiting belief right in there, because you've got a belief about, money is just energy. I mean, it's $10. I can do that, but if somebody loses a dog, well, someone loses a dog. But if it's my dog, that's tragic. Now, that's just a bad analogy. But $10, yeah, I can do $10. What is $100,000? It's just a lot of $10, and it's just, so there's a belief about that's too big a number, but it's just, that's a little so we got to shift that belief to start. And this all comes down to, a lot of it comes down to believing in yourself, right? A lot of beliefs. So what are those beliefs about you that you hold that are really getting in your way? Because otherwise that wouldn't scare you, the $100,000. Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
I often share with a lot of the students that I'm helping break through that glass ceiling. I interviewed, well, over my time period, I've interviewed quite a few people. And Greg Reed told me, he says, Dan, he says, there's this glass ceiling that we all see as what we can accomplish. He says, the reality is, in any industry, look at the people that have done things so much further outside the box than anyone else. I personally know people in my industry that make well over $1 million a year on commission. So if you're talking the typical industry standard of a 70-30 split, 70% of the profit goes back to the company, 30% goes to the salesperson, and they're bringing home $1 million a year. They're hitting huge numbers. Like, just do the simple math, and you realize that these guys are hitting, $400,000 or $500,000 a month in business. So with that being said, I look at it and I say, that's interesting, because if they can do it, what makes them so special that I can't? Right. And, look at business. You got people like Jeff Bezos who have taken Amazon to heights that's unforeseen. You got people like Mark Zuckerberg that's taken Facebook. You got, Steve Jobs. And of course, all these guys are guys that are in the, realm of changing the world. But you also got guys like the guy that created Flex Seal. It's a great product. To me, it's changed a lot of the way I do things. It's changed my world many times when I had things leaking. So, but that's a little piece of the pie. And if you're talking $1 trillion pie, which transportation and logistics is, there's a piece of that pie for everyone. And to think that you don't deserve that, 1,000%, Lynn, and to think that you don't deserve that piece of the pie is almost ridiculous. Because if you do nothing, and here's where I'm going to push back to you a little bit on this, is, let's look at, understand the mindset to get there. But now let's talk about tactically. How do you get there? And I share with people, you need to educate. You need to train yourself. Like, listen, if this is your career, and anyone out there, and I mean, everyone that follows me is probably sick of hearing it by now, but I don't care, because I'm going to keep pounding it home. If this is your career, educate yourself.
Yeah.
Be a pro. Be the best that you can be, and then get better. Because as you scale up, those thoughts that we talked about, the spiraling out of control, the vortex of negativity, gets not eliminated, but it comes less, and it stays less time, right? So you have less negative thoughts, it stays less time. But I'll share with you, and please, I'd love your feedback on this. I come out to explore a real big opportunity or to get involved in something I've never been involved for. Even now, I've sold hundreds of millions of dollars in business. I've done millions of dollars a year in profit. I'm like, can I really do that? And then I stop and I go, come on, really? Like, it's the same equation, just a different, so same formula, just a different mathematical equation, but it's the same process in everything we do in life. I remember back in the early days, I used to be at a lot of Bob Proctor events, and he was just like, if the goal doesn't scare me, it's not big enough. And I used to think, why on earth would you want to be scared all the time of a goal, right? And that's, the whole SMART goals, and, set easy ones that you can hit, make yourself feel better, 9th place trophies, all this other crap. And as I progressed through personal and professional growth, I really started realizing, no, these things got to be like, okay, all right, we're going to do this. Let's do it. And if we're going to do it, let's go at it hard, give it the best of our abilities, and even scale that up 20%. And should things not work out, at least I'm going to find nugget in there. I mean, I've lost a $20 million brokerage company because I let my ego get in the way of how I dealt with customers in 2008 and 9 when the economy fell out. I can sit here and continually cry about it and say, I lost a $20 million company. I was on the verge of bankruptcy. I was this, I was that. I mean, all this other BS that could have come out about losing that company. Instead, I was like, okay, let's go. Let's get back on the horse before we get to that point. Right. But Lynn, when I was going through all that turmoil, it wasn't consciously where I said, I'm going to be broke if I don't do something in X amount of time. It was, for me, this is going to happen, and we're going to make some changes, and we're going to do some things, and I'm going to learn from it. And let me tell you, it was an expensive lesson,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, but I learned.
Yeah.
I learned.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, everybody's different. It's very bio-individual. But there's so much packed into what you said. A lot of the times, and I'll get to the how-tos in a minute, you know, I remember toward the end of, before I left the bank for good, there was a time after the injury it was, and I was so unhappy in my career, and I couldn't understand why. I was so happy in other aspects of my life, but I just was miserable in my career. And so I sat back and I said, wait a minute, what story am I telling myself about my career? And I just did this little exercise, and I wrote work is blank. And then I just started filling in the blanks, and work is a chore, work is political, work is challenging, work is tough, there was not one positive thing I was telling myself about my career. Then well, the truth was, after the injury, I couldn't remember how to do a lot of my work. I was allowing limiting thoughts in that fear limiting thoughts are always based in lack or fear, lack of time, lack of money, etc. I was, you know, I had to in order to drive, and I did a lot of driving for work, a lot of calls I had to be on the road for, right? But because the injury, I was only allowed to drive so many miles in a given day. So I had to stay in hotels quite a bit. And even when I was driving, I would get really dizzy and really nauseous. And so there were all these other components and aspects of getting to work and functioning in my work life that were annoying and that were bringing me down. And I was letting those thoughts dictate my experience in the workspace. And once I realized that, I was able to tell myself a different story. But, you know, to identify these thoughts, first, you know, by the time you are feeling anxiety, they've already gotten a lot of momentum, right? So I say in my book, the best way even to know they're occurring is to just meditate. You know, I was alone with my thoughts for 8 weeks. I didn't have other people interfering. And what happens, if you want the science behind that, you can only be in one part of the brain at a time. And when you're in what they call the PCC, the posterior centigal cortex, that's when it's all the planning and the what about me and the internally driven thinking. When you get out of that and the amygdala, the fight or flight, that's when all this stuff occurs. When you get out of that, then you can really start to shift things around. Meditation is a good one. Whenever you have a response in the body, check in with your mind to say, what on earth was I just thinking about? Then, you know, that you're talking about learning. And in my book, I talk about there's 6 impact imperatives. Number 1, always awareness. Like I was just saying, try to start to become aware of the thinking that gets you in your way. And number 2 through 6 are in any order, but you need all of them. So continued learning. Whatever your intention is, you know, if you want to be the best salesperson, you're not going to get there just by thinking I want to be the best salesperson or by putting affirmations up on your mirror. You know, I know that people say affirmations all day, but it's more than that. You know, it's not simply change your thinking, change your life. So you need that continued learning. Study those people and learn about them, but then also practice, implement, practice, because that, much like an NFL player or a concert pianist, they're not rewiring their brain without that practice. It doesn't become part of the autonomic nervous system. It doesn't become automatic unless you've learned and practiced over and over.
Exactly. And here's the thing when it comes to, and I'll add to that because I think this is very important for everybody listening and watching, is that these elite NFL players, these elite pianists, these elite athletes are also masters of finance, masters of health, masters of mindset, masters of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not control, but you know, when the alarm goes off at 6, they get up and they do what they have to do. Discipline. There we go. Thank you. I can't believe that. That's a big word. Can't believe I forgot. They're masters of all of this as well. How do you think, and this is one thing, like Marcus it connected you and I, and this is one thing that Marcus and I talked about was, in order to get to the NFL, to become that elite, in order to become an Olympic athlete. And, for everyone sitting there thinking, oh, well, that's not me. It is. Why would you not want to be the Olympic athlete of sales in your industry? in your company. Like, why would you not want to be that? That is the up of the upper echelon of elitism. And it's nothing to do with I'm better than anyone else. It's, hey, I'm going to take this skill that I have and I'm going to 10x it today. But you need to be a master in so many other areas. Discipline for one as a salesperson. You salespeople out there, as you're listening to Lynn and I go back and forth, understand you got to have a structure in place to create that level of growth. Yeah. You have to have that mental set. So for everyone listening and saying, well, I don't know, Lynn, if that really applies to me. It does.
Yeah, it does.
Because that mental mindset is everything. That structure you talk about is everything. So sorry, I just had to jump in there, but now go ahead. Back to number 3.
So here's the problem with commitment and discipline. Sometimes people have a limiting belief about that word. And I said to a woman once, I said, it just takes perseverance. And she went, ugh. And I said, whoa, let's step back, because you just had a really, really strong reaction to a word. A word is inherently neutral. So what is that? What have you assigned that word? What does that mean? And she said, it's going to be hard. It's going to be a chore. It's going to be like just too difficult. And I'm like, wait a minute, let me offer you my interpretation of that word. When I talk about perseverance, I've got an end goal, and I know that to be true. I know something to be true. So I'm going to, if going this way doesn't work, I'll try to go that way. I'll try whatever way I have to until I get there, because I believe in that end. So perseverance to me is a much softer definition. And so when people think of commitment and discipline, oftentimes they think of it's a prison sentence. And all to me that means is I'm committing to me because I am worth it and I can get through that ceiling. And I don't care if there's 6 zeros after that, 5 or 3 zeros after the 5. They're equally as attainable to me. And so you have to have discipline. It's not a prison sentence. And you also have to be able to, feel that outcome. There are a lot of people many people who have had, severe cancers and have been told that they were not going to make it, and they've had spontaneous remissions. They all believed that their mind had something to do with their condition and that their mind will have something to do with healing them. And they could feel what it felt like in their bodies to be well. So when you have an intention of, I want to make that sales quota, I want to get to whatever your account is, you've got to be able to feel what that feels like. And I'll tell you why that is really important, because your body has no idea whether an event has happened or if your brain's fabricating it. In other words, it believes everything that you tell it. And it's only going to reinforce that whole process of achieving your goals. Does that make sense? That
makes a lot of sense, actually. I like the way you framed that, because as we become higher producing at anything in life, and let's take it even away from sales, at anything in life, as we start to elevate to new heights of awareness, that's a key aspect to it, that our brain tells our body and our body just acts, whereas a lot of people probably have the reverse thoughts about it. Well, my body's telling me it's wrong, so therefore it must be wrong. But really it started in that subconscious part of your mind. That's that limiting belief, that limiting conditioning, right?
It's that redundant feedback loop.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so that's great. Now let's go on to number 3.
Number 3. Oh, in the imperatives?
Yes.
I think I've gone through, we've gone through awareness, learning, repetition, the commitment or discipline, that's 4. What I was just talking to about was heightened emotion. That's what I was referring to. I call it elevated emotion in the book, but it's that when you have an intention, align it with a paired emotion. So that feeling of, here's my intention. Do I want to be the best-selling author? What on earth does that look? Can you envision that in full sensation? That's really important to helping you get to that goal. And then appreciation is really important. And just kind of being, so not in the victim mode, staying appreciative for what you've learned thus far, for what you have thus far, for everything you're learning. When you are in that, you cannot be in growth while you're in negativity at the same time. And so when you're in the state of appreciation, you are in growth, you are in the best, most open, vibrational, for lack of a better word, state you can be for change and for positive change to occur. So when you're finding that you're going into these contracting negative states of thinking, shift that to a more appreciative area. Now, let me just say, if you've got negative thinking that's really gained momentum and you're really feeling it, you can't get there from there. So it's a shift. So you can't get from the state of extreme negativity and doubt, self-doubt, to I'm the king of my, I am going to, make $1 million this year. You can't do it in an instant. So there are steps you can take to shift, to get that belief in yourself back and get you back on track.
I think that's one of the biggest key points that everyone's got to take home is, this process that you're talking about. Because how many times have we seen, really good books become shelf help, really good training programs become, shelf help.
Yes.
For all of you out there that are struggling, and I'll speak for my industry specific, Lynn, 2019 was a bloodbath in transportation. A lot of companies lost money. More companies went out of business than in any other years, like multiple years combined. Even as we start January, the December 31st, January 1st, January 2nd that we are today. These dates are again filled with more companies going out of business. So for all of you listening in that transportation and logistics world, just understand it's taken 12, 13 months to get to this point. Don't expect tomorrow to turn 180 degrees from today. Don't expect, with everything Lynn and I are talking about and the strategies. Listen, just this one podcast, if you take these strategies and you apply them and strategically apply them every day of your life, in 12 months from now, you will be in a much different world than you are now. But it takes that, I'll use it again, that discipline of daily action towards. And I find a lot of the times with a lot of people, and hey, I'll put my hand up. I was there decades ago where it was, okay, I read this book, I'm going to apply it. A week later, you're like, this is BS. That doesn't work. Why did I spend, 3 days reading that book of my vacation? Well, that's because you didn't allow it time to fester. I remember, if I go back to some of the things Bob's taught me, where he says, the incubation period for a baby is 9 months. You can't, get pregnant and then look 2 weeks later and go, nah, this is crap. Nothing's happening, So the incubation period for your sales, and I'll go back to something that I said earlier in the podcast, when I talked about those lines, that salespeople, they really start closing accounts, and that closing of accounts drives that greater productivity when they don't have that big goal, that big drive, that big ambition at the end of the line that they know, that they believe wholeheartedly they can accomplish. Because I believe that's when your motivation turns to inspiration and that goal drives you as opposed to you driving the goal, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But, I also find that this slump, if not realized right away, actually takes twice as long to get out of than it does. So yeah, and I'm glad you agree with that, because unfortunately, what was it? I heard in the past it was like 5 positive thoughts counteract 1 negative thought. So for all of you that have been slumping and had these negative sales months for 5 months, don't expect things to turn around in 2 weeks. Might take 10 months. Yeah. Right. So if you just double the time, and love your thoughts on this, and I'm sure I know what your answer is going to be, but if you remain consistent and you stick with it and you continue to do the things that are driving traction, the big needle movers in your business, and you just keep pushing towards them, things will turn around for you. You keep that mentality, you maintain that high vibe, that high energy, that choice to be that elite individual, that elite salesperson. For people watching and listening to this that are not in sales, that elite individual, if you're going to be a garbage man or woman, be the best garbage man or woman you could possibly be. and understand how it works. What are your thoughts there?
Well, and not only that, when those things happen and those downturns, they're not going to impact you as deeply and as tragically as maybe they would have before you implemented these practices. And a word on the shelf help books, they end up on the shelf because it's one thing to cognitively understand concepts that you read in a book, but to really have impactful change, when you're reading a book, it's all up here in your analytical mind, but it's all these thoughts are in the subconscious. That's where the program is. Our program is running us, right? I mean, so in order to really implement change, it's got to get into the program. So this is why meditation is so helpful. This is why repetition is so important, because that's when it starts to change that program. So that's why a lot of people, they'll read a book and they'll think, oh, I've learned all this. Why doesn't anything change? Because you've only read it. You haven't reprogrammed. And that's a key part of all of this.
I like that. That is so true. And I never thought of it in that aspect.
Yeah, think about like when you go to reach for a cup of coffee in the morning, you're not even thinking about it. Your neurons have already raised your arm to grab the cup before you've consciously thought about it. You know, most of our thoughts are 95% are in the subconscious. We are operating at like 5% in the conscious mind. And, you know, when I went back to work and nothing was bothering me. And because of this process, it was like I had taken a love pill. And that's kind of the only way I can describe it. I still had the same crappy job. I still had the same coworkers who annoyed me and taking credit for the work I did. But it was like everything was so much brighter and things did not bother me. So I could just like get down and focus on my work and enjoy it. So after you go through this process, it's not like you're not only going to be a better salesperson, you're just going to be more happy with who you are. And then you may even find your defining circumstances in life, you're not attaching the same meaning. They're just circumstances. They're not something horrible, much like my accident. It was just something that happened to me, in my view. Now, granted, the extent of the injury kept me from realizing the extent of the injury because I was mush. But, if just think about how you define an outcome. If the sale didn't go through, are you shaming yourself? That's more negative spiral. So, be careful of those spirals as well, because they're easy to get into.
I love that. And I think that is a great place to end this for all of you listening. I hope you guys and gals all took that information down. By all means, rewatch this. Connect with Lynn. We'll have some of the information on the website or on, wherever you're watching this particular episode. Lynn, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic hour of conversation. I love it. I think a lot of the mindset strategies and tactics you brought, if they're used by the people listening, I think you're going to get a lot of conversation back with how powerful these actually are. I love that. Downloading that program and, internalizing it as opposed to just, reading it and, thinking you understand it. That hit me. That hit me hard.
Programs, these 3-day leadership retreats, that's why they don't work. Because they just give the same pep rallies, same stale agenda, and talks and dinner and drinks, and which is all good. And that's fine. But then you get back to work and you're in the same mode 4 hours later. Yep.
You're absolutely right. A lot of my key programs that I do are extensive, multi-week, 4, 5, 6 week programs. And then it's follow-up and then it's follow-up and then it's follow-up and it's, okay, where are you at now? And with all of my coaching clients, I have companies coming to me saying, okay, I want you to do, like a 1-day thing. I said, okay, well, I won't. You want me to just come in for a keynote? That's fine. But understand, if you really want your sales team to progress, if you really want things to change, it's an ongoing process. Sure, 1, 2, 3 days to get the core concepts, but then what's happening a week later? I put on a live event, a full day live event, and the follow-up after was astronomical. For 2 months, I followed up. Where are we all at? Where are you at? And not not all of the people at the conference came to use me as their coach, and that's okay. That's fine. but I still want to make sure it just wasn't, yeah, I get it. Thank you very much. And go back to the norm, because now we're 4 months down the road since the conference. And some people are killing it with the information because they took that information and applied it. They digested it, they downloaded it, and they utilized it in their operating system from there moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, Lynn. To everybody watching and listening, thank you for spending the time with us again. Remember, go out there, make every call educational, and crush your sales. Take care until the next episode.